Greetings. I am Legacy Moon, and this is True Crime and Mysteries. Welcome back, current subscribers, new subscribers, sometime watchers, and those of you who are here for the very first time. A couple of weeks ago, I did a video about the state of Mississippi and how men were being reported as missing, and come to find out they were deceased and buried without the families being notified. Now, I will link that in the description so you can watch that video in case you missed it. But today we are going to be talking about something that's even more mind-boggling than that. We are going to be in the state of Alabama, where apparently they think that they could just take the inmates' organs without any type of consent. Sounds crazy to you? Well, it sounds crazy to me too. Now let's get into it. In the year of 2023, Jim Kennedy passed away at the Limestone Correctional Facility in Harvest, Alabama. Now, his body was sent to the funeral home, and as they were preparing Mr. Kennedy for, his funeral, they realized something was wrong. So they called his sister. Her name was Sarah Kennedy, or I should say is Sarah Kennedy. And, they said to her, "Did you realize we got this body and there were no organs?" She was quite shocked. She didn't know what to think or what to say. Now, I'm going to say this, and I hope it's not offensive to anyone, but Black people, we like our organs with us. And we also don't like to be cremated. I don't know where that comes from or why, but that's the case with a lot of Black people. I myself don't care. I'll take cremation. And the thing about the organs is, if I didn't give you permission to take them, then you shouldn't have them. 5 months after Jim Kennedy Jr. passed away, there was another inmate by the name of Arthur Stapler. He was 85 years old, and he passed away. He was being housed at the Hamilton Aged and Infirmed Center, and this place is also run by the Alabama Department of Corrections. Arthur's son, Billy, had hired a private pathologist to perform an autopsy on the body. And this is when he found out that his father's organs were missing. So his son, Billy, contacted the University of Alabama, which is among one of the providers that conducts autopsies for the prison system. He, requested that his father's organs be returned. And he was told that the organs were received, and the only thing that they had were his brain and his heart in a plastic bag. They then received the lungs and some other internal organs that came back, but they were in pieces. Not all of the organs were returned. This is like some invasion of the not body snatchers, but organ snatchers. These people have no permission, no consent from the decedent or the family to take these organs. Having said that, the State Department of Corrections and the University of Alabama at Birmingham are facing disturbing allegations from families of 5 of the inmates whose organs were removed and kept, of course, without consent. They are filing a lawsuit. The lawyers are claiming that the inmates' organs were retained for teaching purposes, and of course, again, without consent. An associate professor at the Duke University School of Medicine and also an expert in prison standards by the name of Lauren Brinkley Rubenstein is quoted as saying, "It's the wild, wild west. There's no governance involving the handling of inmates' organs in the prison system." She further stated, "It's like the provision of health care. No standards. What that health care should look like, who has bodily autonomy and who doesn't, and who, when someone dies, acts as next of kin to the people who are incarcerated. All those things are just undefined. There's no standard and there's no oversight." Basically, and this is me talking now, the prison system in Alabama is deciding what happens to these inmates' bodies. And once again, no authorization from anybody, no consent, no nothing. The University of Alabama at Birmingham Hersink School of Medicine holds itself out to be one of the nation's top academic medical centers for research, education, and clinical care. It houses one of America's largest academic hospitals. Now, according to the University of Alabama at Birmingham, it has an agreement between two state institutions with divergent missions, and they conduct autopsies for the corrections department, which is, they are the ones who are responsible for getting the proper organizations and legal representation of the deceased. Now, these authorization forms, they provide permission for not only the autopsy, but specifically includes consent for the removal of the organs or tissue or, anything that they can use for diagnostic purposes or testing. So basically, what we're having here is finger pointing between, you have UAB saying, "Oh, well, we do this, but corrections is supposed to get the permission." And then you have corrections pointing the finger at them saying they're doing something wrong as far as getting the proper paperwork. So he said, she said, but what's really the truth? The Department of Corrections have stated that once an inmate dies, the body is transported to the Alabama Department of Forensic Science, or UAB, for autopsy depending on several factors, including, but not limited to, region and whether the death is unlawful, suspicious, or unnatural. And as far back as 2018, a group of UAB medical students, they questioned the ethics of the school's retention of some of the inmates' organs without consent. And they wrote a letter in July of that year expressing their concerns regarding the consent process for the use of the organs for incarcerated individuals. They said that they weren't really concerned with the practice of autopsy, but they were pretty much the consent or the lack thereof. It was that process that concerned them. The only thing that really should be done, or let's just say the only thing that the warden only has consent to, is the autopsy to determine the cause of death. This other stuff about tissues and retention and teaching and education and organs, the warden can't sign off on that. But He does. He signs off when he signs the body over, and he states no limitations. So that therefore is giving the UAB permission to take these organs and do whatever they please.
It was a funeral home that first alerted Sarah Kennedy something was wrong with the body of her brother-in-law, who died while imprisoned.
They said, "Did y'all realize he came back without his organs?" And I'm like, "What do you mean, he came back without his organs?"
The funeral director told Sarah everything was missing inside Jim Kennedy Jr.'s body. Everything but his eyes.
Liver, heart, all of your major organs, they were gone.
She says those organs were taken without the knowledge or permission of Marvin Kennedy, Kennedy Jr.'s brother and legal representative.
But yet they made the decisions for you, or represented you without your permission.
Sarah repeatedly tried to contact the prison and the University of Alabama at Birmingham, which is among the providers that conducts autopsies for the prison system.
I had a lot of questions. But no answers.
Eventually, she says she spoke over the phone with someone who identified himself as an autopsy department supervisor for the university, and she secretly recorded that conversation.
We've never had this request done before.
To have the organs back?
Yeah.
Well, who buries somebody without their organs?
Well, we do it all the time. Because
we don't want to do it for our religious preference. We don't want to do that.
Now, I will tell you this, is that UAB is a teaching institution, and any teaching institution that does autopsies keeps their organs.
Well, we did not, and Junior did not want that. We have not agreed with the prison for his body to be turned over for no study, and we want those organs back.
5 months after Kennedy Jr.'s death, Billy Stapler made his own alarming discovery.
It's just insane. It's like a horror movie that I can't wake up from.
The private pathologist he hired to perform an autopsy on his father, Arthur Stapler, was unable to perform it.
She said he had an empty cavity. There was nothing there.
Stapler says he held the power of attorney for his father and never authorized the removal or retention of the organs.
I just want him to be whole again.
Stapler says he spoke with the same UAB supervisor. Eventually, his private pathologist received what was said to be his father's brain and heart back. But some organs, like his lungs, came back in pieces. The rest were gone.
And I'm asking, where's the rest of his organs? And he tells me that they possibly got thrown away. And I'm like, how do you throw away organs? Why did you even take them out of him?
Funeral experts tell CNN after an autopsy, organs are normally put in a bag and placed back inside the body. But that's not what happened in the case of these 7 inmates. The families of 5 of them now suing the Alabama Department of Corrections and UAB. The university conducted the autopsies for all the inmates but one, says attorney to the families, Lauren Ferrano. She tells CNN the families insist none of them were organ donors. So how in the world did this all happen without family consent? The Alabama Department of Corrections tells CNN it does not comment on pending litigation, nor does it authorize or perform autopsies. But UAB tells CNN ADOC does approve them and says it's ADOC's responsibility to get family approval. What do you think is your most damning piece of evidence?
The contract between the Department of Corrections and UAB is just about all the evidence we need to show that illegal activity is happening. That contract shows these parties empowering a warden to make a decision about taking out organs and keeping them from loved ones. The law directly contradicts that position. The law says very clearly a warden does not have that right.
CNN reached out to the Alabama legislature for clarity. A legislative attorney saying in a memo, a warden has no legal authority to approve an autopsy, and their agreement may be illegal. And just what happened to those organs? UAB told CNN in a statement, in some cases, their pathologists keep organs for further testing to come to an accurate cause of death. Ferrano claims the organs serve another purpose at the school.
Right now, we have concrete evidence that the students are using some of these organs for training in medical school.
A group of 13 UAB medical students questioned the ethics of the school's retention of some inmate organs without consent as far back as 2018. They wrote this letter to school administrators, saying in part, "Our concern is not with the practice of autopsy, but with the process of consent for the retention and use of tissue samples." Two of those former medical students tell CNN their instructors acknowledged that many of their teaching samples came from inmates because inmates tend to have more developed disease, easier to see and learn from. The students agreed to speak on the condition of anonymity, fearing career repercussions, one saying, "It's plainly and obviously wrong. There is no understanding of medical ethics in which this is permissible." UAB accused the student whistleblowers of inaccuracies in a statement to CNN, something the students deny. Despite the accounts from former students, the university tells CNN it does not use inmate organs to teach medical students. So we went back to them and asked, "Have you ever?" showing them their own report from 2018 that states they do. But UAB refused to answer. For the families, left frustrated and without answers, nothing short of accountability and policy changes can make them whole.
What made it right for them to just go ahead and just give away a person to somebody else and say, here, you can play with this person's body like that?
The attorney to the families, Lauren Ferrano, tells me at least 2 more lawsuits are being prepared. And Abby, back in 2021, an Alabama law was passed that requires medical examiners to notify next of kin if they will retain someone's organs to determine identification or the cause or manner of death. It also requires next of kin approval to keep organs for, quote, research or other purposes. Ferrano will be leaning heavily on that law in court.
What I'm going to talk about next, it's a little different. It is, and the reason why I'm doing it is because I'm torn and I want to get your opinions in the comments section. I know that, there are some people incarcerated for petty crimes, and then there's others incarcerated for very serious crimes, such as rape or unaliving someone, all of those things. But I'm still torn against, or I shouldn't say against, I'm torn as to the treatment of these people, because I still believe no matter whatever depraved things that they may have done, I still think or feel like they should be treated with humanity. They just should not be degraded as they probably degraded their victims. So I want to go back to talk about Jim Kennedy Jr. for a moment. He's the first person I spoke about at the beginning of this story. Now, when he died in the prison, he was serving a sentence of 300 years for rape, Sodom and Gomorrah, and kidnapping. When he passed away, his family wasn't even notified that he was deceased until 4 days later. Why? Why did it take so long for the family to be notified? I mean, isn't there a clerk? Isn't there just somebody whose job is to handle administrative things like that? I would think it was. I would think it is. Then we have the 85-year-old author Stapler, he was another gentleman I spoke about. And when he died back in December, he had been housed at the Hamilton Aged and Infirm Center. He was in jail, convicted of for 10 years for the crime of child SA. Now, his autopsy that was done, it at least confirmed that he passed away due to congestive heart failure. But it still makes me wonder, should his organs have been just taken and experimented on? This man right here, his name is Kevin Moore, and he passed away at the age of 42 on the 21st of July in 2023, and he was at the Limestone Detention Center. He was serving a life sentence without parole for the conviction of attempted unaliving and attempted burglary. Now, a chaplain called his mother and informed her of Kevin's death 3 days after he had passed away. And his cause of death was a fentanyl overdose. This is an inmate, and he passed away of a fentanyl overdose. Of course, when the mortician received his body, there were no organs. Phone calls were made. The family wanted the organs back. So they tracked down these organs, of course, at UAB. And this relative of Kevin's by the name of Simon went to pick up Kevin's organs, and they were given to him in this red bag. I mean, I'm not even sure if that's sanitary. I don't know if they say the name of the bag is a Vescara bag. I mean, I don't know if that's some type of medical bag or whatever, but it just looks like, one of the bags I get from the Walmart. So, I mean, I'm not sure how safe this even is. Of course, Simon says, I call it thievery. I call it barbarism. His 82-year-old grandmother said, you can't even die no more. Even in death, people robbing you and disrespecting you. I mean, I'm sorry. I kind of halfway agree with her. That's why I really want other people's opinions on this, because I'm just torn. I feel like the disrespect, on one hand, well, they're criminals, whatever. But on the other hand, I find it just very disgraceful and disrespectful. Sometimes I'm just a little bit too empathetic, but, I just want to know, am I the only one that kind of sees this as wrong?
Good evening, I'm Michael Rinker.
And I'm Jessica Gauthier.
Tonight, the Alabama Attorney General's office could be trying to dismiss lawsuits that claim the University of Alabama Birmingham allegedly took organs from deceased Alabama inmates without permissions from their families.
WDHN's Aaron Dixon spoke with the attorneys for the family members, and they say that the Attorney General's office is trying to hide what's really going on. All in a story you'll see only on WDHN.
The 5 lawsuits filed so far claim that inmates in Alabama were sent to have autopsies performed after their deaths without the family's permission. And when the bodies were released to the families, they discovered their loved ones were missing some or all of their internal organs. Several of those autopsies were performed at the University of Alabama, Birmingham.
We need to stop this practice from occurring so that no other families are having to go through this.
UAB said that it only performed autopsies after the Corrections Department confirmed it has received consent from the family, and the organ removal is sometimes necessary to determine a cause of death. Attorneys for these families say that is not always the case.
Medical school students have come forward to us and told us that those organs that are being taken during autopsies are then ending up in their labs for them to practice on.
Last week, UAB announced that it will no longer perform autopsies on inmates who died from natural causes or suspected overdoses, but that does not settle the lawsuits.
There really is not true justice that would ever be achieved. What you can do is try to bring some measure of peace to what has occurred to these families and maybe provide them some answers. But will they ever receive justice? No.
Recently, the attorneys were told that the Alabama Attorney General's office plans on filing a motion to dismiss the lawsuits.
Instead of trying to get to the truth of what happened, he's trying to shield the victims and the people of Alabama from what happened and trying to get this case dismissed from the beginning.
Attorneys for the family expect the motions to be denied by the judge.
I think the AG's office is going to do everything in their power to shield these families from getting answers. But if he decides to go to Montgomery, we'll do the appellate courts. We'll fight him there. I mean, there's going to be a reckoning on this one way or the other. We're just not going to say, you filed a motion to dismiss, you win. No, that's not going to happen.
Fareno says more lawsuits are expected to be filed in the future. In Dothan, Aaron Dixon, WDHN News for the Wiregrass.
On Thursday, April the 25th, 2024, the Alabama House of Representatives approved a bill to criminalize organ retention without family consent. Alabama Representative Chris England, in the beginning, this wasn't really a priority of his to sign this year. But he said that there have been some issues that have been coming up where there may be just a flat out illegal agreement between two entities, that one pretends to have the authority to stand in the stand of next of kin and give that authority to harvest on organs after an autopsy. And by the way, of course, I said 2024 and I meant 2024. I don't know why I keep doing that. As for me, I don't really care about what happens to my organs when I leave this earth. That's not anything that's in my mindset. However, I don't think anybody has the right to just take it upon themselves to take them because I am no longer here. If I didn't give that permission, or if you do not have the permission from my next of kin. Having said that, to me and for me, this is kind of reminiscent of the Tuskegee experiments. You know, you go in, they say that they're treating you for this and you're really getting a placebo. They're studying something different than what they told you. And those had long-lasting effects for generations. And this is what causes a lot of mistrust in the Black community with medical professionals. Now, to me, this lines up because you have a contract that says the warden, he can have my body autopsied. He could see what my cause of death was, but he's taking it a step further and saying, oh, well, this gives me consent to do whatever I want with the organs. And that's just not what it is. Never did I ever think I would be doing a story about organ harvesting without authorization.